Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel where today we're taking a look at my top 5 science fiction books I am the most excited to read. This video will be in two parts. So the first part will be an update to my previous video of the top 5 science fiction books. I read them all. I'll give you an update on what I ended up thinking about them. And then the second part will be my new list. So I will go ahead and leave a timestamp down below. If you're not interested in the update and just want to skip it, just look down in the description. It'll be there. But let's just go ahead and jump right into that update. So I did go ahead and order these books from I liked it the least to I liked it the most. And the very first book I have to talk about is Extreme Makeover by Dan Wells. This is an adult science fiction satire. And essentially we're following our main character of Lyle, who is a scientist who accidentally invents this lotion that does some peculiar things. Essentially, if you are the first person to touch it, it imprints your DNA onto that lotion. And any subsequent person who uses that same batch of imprinted lotion will have their DNA overwritten and they will turn into a physical copy of you. And so, of course, the cosmetic company that Lyle works for sees this as a huge potential moneymaker, and Lyle decides that maybe he needs to fight against that. And then the story goes from there. This book is a satire. Did I mention? It's satire. So here's the thing. I don't hate satire, I just don't generally love it. And if I had realized this was satire, I never would have put this on the list. Now, the fact that I didn't realize it was satire is 100% my fault, because it's literally in the first sentence of the description. I don't know how I missed it. But once I did realize it was satire, I did go ahead and start reading it anyway, and I gave it a shot. But after about 150 pages, I did DNF it. And the reason is that these corporate executives are really trying to make money, and they are making choices that are basically going to doom humanity to make a buck. And it was making me really angry. And then Lyle was like, well, I should try to fix the situation. And Lyle is dumb and really doesn't know he doesn't know the right thing to do if it smacked him in the face. And so he was completely ineffective. And it just, like I said, it was making me really angry. And so I decided to prioritize my mental health, and I just went ahead and DNF'd it. After that, we have Ancillary Justice by Leckie, the first book in an adult science fiction trilogy. And this is following our main character of Breck. And Breck is an ancillary. Basically, she is one part of a hive mind that is a giant spaceship. Basically, in this world, there's these spaceships that are sentient, and they also have the technology to turn humans into ancillaries. Basically, they're no longer their own self. The spaceship is able to control the body. It has their mind, everything. And so the spaceship becomes a hive mind. Breck is the last remaining piece of the hive mind of her spaceship, and she is absolutely hell-bent on figuring out what happened, what went wrong, who did it, and getting revenge on them. And this was a really interesting book. It's a dual timeline story. So we're following Breck present day as she is trying to position herself in such a way to exact her revenge, and then the other timeline is the events that led up to her spaceship and the majority of her ancillaries being destroyed. And so I did find this really interesting. I did sometimes at parts have a hard time following it, but generally speaking, I thought it was interesting and I enjoyed my time with it, and I ended up giving this 4 stars. However, I did realize that this is definitely not a book for me per se, and so I am not continuing with this series. Basically, I read the first book and I was like, that's interesting, I enjoyed that, and I have absolutely no inclination to pick up the second book, so I'm just leaving it there. And now my significant other will be reading that sometime soon. After that, we have the Sirantha Jax series by Ann Aguirre, and it starts with the first book, Grim Space. This is an adult science fiction series that follows our main character of Sirantha Jax. She is a jumper. Basically, she navigates the spaceship as it moves from point A to point B in faster than light travel. And in the opening of this first book, we find her in a prison cell, essentially, and she is the sole survivor of this horrific spaceship crash, and she's being interrogated about it. And then a mysterious stranger appears in her cell and says, "I'll break you out." And she follows, and it's not until they're en route to their new destination that she realizes nothing is free. And the story kind of goes from there. And this is a really interesting series because I really enjoyed my time with it. However, a lot of people are not going to love it. Why? You guys, it's not super plot driven. It's much more slice of life kind of thing. There are certain parts of it that are just hot mess. Like the world building, we don't get a ton of it. Like, you really have to love characters and be intrigued by these characters and want to see what's going to come next. And that's really what drew me in. I liked Sirantha. I liked seeing how she was going to deal with certain situations, and I wanted to know more about her story. And so I ended up reading this entire series. I really liked this series. However, I do understand that there are a lot of people that probably will not, or at least not love it nearly as much as I do. But in the end, I ended up giving this series somewhere between 4 and 4.25 stars. I do have a full-length review for the series itself. If you are interested, I will leave it linked down below. Next up is A Thousand Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. And this is the first book in the Firebird trilogy, which is a young adult science fiction trilogy that follows our main character of Marguerite. And her two parents are physicists, and they invented this device called the Firebird, and it allows your consciousness to travel to an alternate dimension. And, well, provided that in that alternate dimension you were born and you're still alive, because your consciousness travels into your body there and you kind of pilot your body around this world. And in the beginning of this particular book, Marguerite's dad has been killed, and the grad student who did it grabbed a Firebird and raced into a different dimension, thereby escaping justice in Marguerite's dimension. So Marguerite is not happy about that. She's not going to let that stand. So she grabs the other Firebird and chases after him. And then the trilogy follows from there. And I really, really like this. Now, originally on my list, I had only said that I wanted to read the first book, not the series, but I am almost done with the series. As of recording, I am like 75% of the way done with the third book. And so, I will talk about the series as a whole, but essentially, in some ways, this is a very typical young adult science fiction story. There's some tropey, there's some overdramatic, it definitely follows the structure of a young adult trilogy, all that kind of stuff. But there are a couple things I think it does really well. And the first is that it is really interesting to go to these alternate dimensions and see what it's like. Claudia Gray clearly has a great imagination, and it's interesting to see what she came up with for alternate worlds. The second is that I really do appreciate that Claudia Gray has no problem asking huge ethical questions. It is very straightforward. How they're asked is very straightforward, to the point where it does feel a bit ham-fisted at times. But at the same time, I'm glad that she didn't shy away from asking them in the first place. And I just, it's very much prominent to Marguerite's thinking at any given time. And I really appreciate that. And the last is that Marguerite is 18, and she definitely has some naive thoughts about the world. However, I mean, that's really normal, right? A lot of our teenage protagonists have naive thoughts about the world. But whereas other series will often allow the narrative or the world to kind of allow something to happen that kind of checks that naive thought, in this particular series, more often Marguerite is getting checked by her friends, by her family, by those around her, basically saying, at one point there's a person who sits down and it's like, "You're being a hypocrite." Or there's another point where it's just Marguerite remembers the words of her older sister, and it changes her behavior. And And I love that so much because that feels so much more realistic to me, because that's been my experience is when you're a teenager, yeah, you have naive ideas, but you're more willing to listen to friends. And if they say you're being dumb, like you're more likely to say, okay, yeah, I guess. And like really, examine it. And Marguerite does that. And like I said, I don't think I've ever seen this in a young adult series. So it was really cool to see. But I've really been enjoying this. This book I ended up giving 4 stars. However, I think that the series itself, like I said, I haven't finished it, but I think that the series itself is going to land somewhere in the 4.25 to 4.5 range. And then lastly, my very favorite book that I ended up reading is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. And this is an adult science fiction romance short novel. Basically, we're following these 2 women, 2 females, red and blue, and they are agents for opposing timelines. And it is their job to go back into the past of the various timelines and change it just enough to create big change down the timeline, like in the future, so that it will help secure their own timeline's victory over the other. And basically, these 2 women are doing this, and in each other, they recognize a worthy opponent, and they start leaving letters for each other, and it's a romance. So it goes from there. But I love this. I love this so much. It's beautiful. It's well written. It's such an interesting idea. Again, we get to go to different times and different places and see what could be, and that's interesting, while still keeping the focus on this relationship. And I really did enjoy that. I will say there are a couple negatives. It is very flowery writing, which can be a little difficult to get used to. This is probably some of the most flowery writing of a book that I actually enjoy. So there you go. But also, the very first chapter is it doesn't feel the same as the rest of the book. So if you do start this and you read the first chapter and you're like, what even is this? Please try and keep going. It settles and everything. But I really, especially because it's only 200 pages, I hate that that's kind of how the first chapter is. And then lastly, just a heads up that it is not heavy science fiction until the very end, and then it is very heavy science fiction. But I don't dock points for this because honestly, I was able to just kind of let the details go and focus on like what this stuff means for the romance, and I was still able to follow and enjoy what happened. And so like if you get the details, it's like a bonus, but if you don't, it's okay, because it's not the point of the story. The point is the romance. So just a few like nitpicky things and things that I think people should have a better understanding of before they try to read this book. But I really, really love this, and I ended up giving this 5 stars. I can't wait to reread it either. I'm like hoping that maybe in like December I'll be able to do that. So now we're to the point where I get to give you my new list of books that I'm super excited to read. And the very first one is Finna by Nino Cipri. Nino Cipri. And this basically, we're in a Swedish big box furniture store, but not that Swedish big box furniture store. And an alternate dimension portal opens up and sucks in one of the customers, and 2 of the employees decide they have to go and get him back. Only now they're having to travel through alternate dimensions while also dealing with each other, because until recently they were a couple, but they broke up last week. And I think that this just, I don't know what it is about this particular story, but everything about that just kind of does it for me. I don't know that each individual part would be good on its own, but like as a whole, it just sounds so interesting. After that, we have Goldilocks by Laura Lam. And this is essentially Earth has left the habitable zone. And so we need to go find a different planet, and soon. And so enter in our main character of, Valerie. Valerie is our main character, and she is the one that is planning the journey to this new, hopefully habitable planet, and she does all the planning, and then that plan is stolen by another crew. Well, I think it feels like stealing, but it's just given to another crew. And Valerie decides she will not stand for that, and so she puts together an all-female astronaut crew and steals the spaceship that was meant to launch for this journey and goes off to the habitable planet herself. Only things immediately start going wrong on this spaceship, and she realized that maybe there was other things going on too. And this sounds so interesting, just like the fact that our planet is no longer habitable and that we're trying to find something. Like, we usually find a lot of science fiction is like, oh, Earth became uninhabitable and that's why we're on this planet now where we've already established a colony. But to have that like in between time where like we have to find a place, we're still in the middle of finding a place, is so interesting to me. And the fact that it's an all-female astronaut crew is just like the cherry on the top. So I'm very excited to read this. After that, we have Goddess in the Machine by Laura Beth Johnson, and this follows our main character of Andra. And Andra was cryogenically frozen for a spaceship trip to a new planet. And she was supposed to be woken up after 100 years, but she wasn't. She was woken up after 1,000 years. So everybody she has ever known and loved and hated is all dead. And their descendants have colonized this planet, and they believe her to be a goddess. And so now she has to figure out what's going on, what happened, what can she do about it? All the while, there's another character who has decided that he is going to use the newly awakened goddess to kind of cement his throne. And she's got to deal with that too. And this just looks, again, it just really hit on everything that interests me, and I am so excited to get into it. The fourth book is The Future of Another Timeline by Analee Newitz. And this is time travel, but we're following two different timelines. And the first one is 1992. We're following our main character of Beth, and she has decided to help a friend deal with the body of her dead boyfriend that's now in the backseat of the car. And Beth comes to the realization that there's probably a lot more women out there that need this particular kind of protection. And then the second timeline is in 2022, and it follows our main character of Tess, and she has been, they've figured out how to go back in time, and she's trying to figure out how to make her timeline edits stick. And about the time that she figures out how to do it, a time war breaks out. And the story just goes from there. I've heard that like these perspectives, of course, end up like coming together at some point, and I'm just so intrigued to see how it all happens. And then lastly is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. Now this follows our main character of Kara, and Kara is plucked out of obscurity because it's determined that she's actually one of the better she's going to be a good interdimensional traveler, because in this particular story, to be able to travel to an alternate dimension, you have to be dead there. And so of all the worlds, she's dead in like 372 of them, and she's alive in like less than 10. And so she decides that she'll go ahead and accept this job. She'll keep her head down. She'll like save her money. She'll have some semblance of security. And then one of her alternate selves turns up dead. It's a bit of a mystery as to why she is dead. And of course, Kara has decided that she's going to need to solve this mystery. And again, this one just completely piqued my interest. So I so badly want to get into this. So those are all 5 books that I'm super excited to read. I clearly have a bent towards time travel or dimensional travel, which I think is hilarious, because I do get really upset when when like dimensional travel and time travel rules get fuzzy or don't make sense. But I do really like a good alternate dimension and time travel story. So I just decided to lean into it for this list, and that's a lot of what I'm reading. But that is it, you guys. Let me know down below if you read any of these books. If it's one of the ones I haven't read, please no spoilers. Like this video if you liked it. And that's all I have. So until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.